sweating with Davidi Kitai.
The last time I sweat with a Belgian, Jean-Claude Van Damme was digging through a discount sock bin and arguing with his girlfriend at a department store in Los Angeles, and that is a true story.
So Kitai's under the gun +1 raise with ace-king has been called by Chris Moneymaker in the big blind. Heads up to the flop, which is 10-9-7 with 2 clubs.
We are in position, I like that.
Moneymaker has checked to Kitai. No c-bet, he checks behind.
It's fine, it's not a great board for ace-king versus a big blind.
Another 9 on the turn. Moneymaker leads. He bets 3,500.
I'm actually okay with a straight-up fold here. When we're behind, we're a big dog to catch up. Some of our outs could be dirty, and if Moneymaker's bluffing, that means we kind of have to commit to calling river, too.
Kitai calls.
It seems unusual, strange even, that Davidi Kitai decides to make this call with this hand in this spot on this board against the very famous Chris Moneymaker. The Moneymaker part isn't so important, but it is odd that Kitai chooses to call here. Grant, what's your thoughts about this turn play from both players?
Well, from both players, I like Moneymaker's line so far. I think on the flop when it goes check, I don't know what Moneymaker's intention was. I hope it was to check raise or check fold. I think check calling would not have been profitable on that board. Of course, Kitai does not bet the flop. I think that could be a board-based thing, but we don't know because this is 2014, and most players were not thinking about board-based decisions like betting when you have a range advantage and checking when your opponent has a range advantage. Kitai may have been, which is going to play a factor later in this hand. I just want to spoil that and let you all know and think about that. I like Moneymaker betting for equity denial on the turn. You can't really expect to get value from worse hands too frequently, but there's too many bad cards on the river. Like any board pair is obviously terrible. We now have 3 high. You know, we just don't want to let Kitai draw for free. So I like Moneymaker's decision. Kitai's decision might have to come down to he can read souls and he knows Moneymaker's uncomfortable, because honestly, I can't come up with a good strategic reason to call. Moneymaker has a clear range advantage. He could have anything here on this board.
Yeah, Kitai also, like, we talked a little bit about this idea on the podcast that perhaps Kitai is thinking he's under-repped a little bit, but he's not. If that's any part of the thought process, if you look at his hands, this is actually one of the worst hands he should be able to show up with on this board. Like, you'd way rather have king jack, you'd rather have king queen, queen jack, hands that have overs along with a gut shot, as well as pairs, all the pocket pairs on the board. Like, this is actually one of the very worst hands he should be able to have right now. Maybe ace jack, but ace jack's got the gutter also. So I find it really surprising he calls, except that he's the great reader of souls. Maybe he gets that, as you're saying, Moneymaker's weak here and thinks, even if I'm losing, I can often take it away on the river. And let's see what happens, because I'm great at that. I have position. This can just work itself out.
Yeah, and Kitai, unlike other elite pros, historically wins in pots that he's not supposed to based on his reads and does things that would, by most elite pros, be considered strategically unadvisable. And this may be one of those instances where he's valuing his reads over the strategy and the range advantage that he clearly does not have. Unfortunately, you can't read people's faces on Nitrogen, but you can read all of your Bitcoin in your Bitcoin wallet when you win all the money on Nitrogen Sports Poker. Jonathan, tell them how.
Well, there's all these different ways. They have sports betting, of course. Of course, they have casino games, but of course, they have poker. And not only do they have all the cash games and things like that, but in tournaments, but they have the very famous, very well-known, very well-spoken about Poker Guys monthly tournament, which is the greatest iterated value in poker, of course, because they guarantee 1,000 buy-ins. They cap the players at 300. We usually get like 200. There's always an incredible overlay. It's the greatest thing. It's not even since sliced bread. It's the greatest thing, including sliced bread. You got to get in there and get you some poker.
You got to use the link that's in our pinned tweet when you sign up in order to get access to that tournament. We'll see you there.
The river is an 8. Well, this is a very straighty board. Moneymaker slows down, he checks.
Well, a check behind's no good because we're only beating like king, queen, and ace, queen. Kind of a fan of turning our hand to a bluff. Yeah, I think I like that. Yes, indeed. When we check back the flop, we can still rep a lot, and the board changed significantly on the river, which I think is great for us when Chris checks.
6,600.
We can have jack 10, jack 9, ace jack, even 8s might play it this way. Chris can't call us too light.
Moneymaker calls.
Okay, we're boned.
Kitai, tables ace high. Moneymaker shows pocket threes.
What? What? Are we a total tell box? Did we just open up an Oreo and listen to it or something?
Holy cannolis, as they say at Italian restaurants. What a call by Chris Moneymaker. The question is, it's a good call in practice, but is it a good call? You know what I'm saying, Jonathan? Is it like a good call?
It's like Wreck-It Ralph. You may be a bad guy, but you don't have to be a bad guy. You know,
Actually, I haven't seen that movie. So
no
I don't
one's
know,
seen
but-
that movie.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that nobody had seen it in the world, but
They
now I know. So that's wonderful.
They did
Thank
make
you for
a
that
sequel.
piece of information. Let's talk about the poker.
Okay.
So, what happened here is something that we kind of prefaced on the turn. Kitai, even though he has ace king high, which supposedly should be good against some bluffs on the turn, Kitai realizes either through a read or through some strategic element, realizes that it's not good enough and decides he has to bluff. Does that seem like the right decision, Jonathan?
I do think he should be bluffing here. Moneymaker, well, certainly does have potentially some air, which is the only thing that even justifies, by the way, the turn call is Moneymaker having basically betting his entire range on the turn. But so Moneymaker may have some air, which you get to win against no matter what you do. But you figure that sometimes is going to bluff anyway. The hands that are most likely to check are the one pair type hands, made hands that aren't straights, basically. This is the kind of board where, as Kitai, we very well might be able to get Moneymaker to fold. If we have a read in addition to that Moneymaker is unhappy and weak, even better. This plays as an 8 a lot for Moneymaker, but it also plays as a 10 and a 7 and maybe even trip 9s, maybe even smaller pocket pairs. Could be a bunch of stuff, but most of that stuff we are losing to right now. And so I really like the idea of betting.
Yeah, as Kitai, an 8 looms large in my head. It feels like Moneymaker has a ton of 8s because he called it out of the big blind for only 1,200 more when he had plenty of chips pre-flop. And it makes tons of sense for him to check the flop, bet the turn, and check the river with any 8. So I think Kitai is targeting an 8 or a similar hand like a 7 or a 10 like you're saying. But an 8 is like flashing in my head if I'm Kitai. I got to get him to fold an 8. So how does Moneymaker make this call? Because 3s is garbage on this board. There's 4 to a straight. There's trip 9s out there. What leads him to make this call? Is it Kitai's fault? Did he do a bad job representing a big hand?
Well, it all depends on the thought process of these players, right? If we rewind our way back to the flop, when it went check, check, if you're Chris Moneymaker, you may be living in a world, from your point of view, where anytime anyone has a pair or any kind of equity on the flop, they bet. And this was the EPT in 2014. There were a lot of C-bets. This isn't impossible or a crazy thought process. So you'd assume maybe possibly any pair is a bet here, and certainly any gut shot, any open end, or anything like that. So if you think every time Kitai has a jack, he's betting the flop. Every time he has an 8, he's betting the flop. Anytime he has a pair, he's betting the flop. Then what is Kitai supposed to have now that is a hand? Like, it's hard to come up with anything that would be a hand, right? It feels like he can't have anything. So if you're in that mindset, now you do have to justify the turn call, which is contradicting everything I just said a bit.
Yeah, that's the problem, because with that 2014 mindset of if Kitai had equity, he would have bet the flop. Well, Kitai had enough equity to call the turn and bet the river, so he just has a pure random float, I guess, is all you can think of if you're Moneymaker. That's about it, right? Because if Kitai can't have a flush draw, if he's betting all of his equity on the flop, he can't have a flush draw that he missed, that he's deciding to now turn into a bluff.
It's not a pure random float, but it could be a hand that, because the board is so draw heavy, it could be a hand that's a big ace, like, or an ace of some sort. Any ace, maybe. Any ace high could decide, I can call against Moneymaker's bet on the turn because there's straight draws and flush draws and all that stuff. Like Moneymaker can have an 8, just like we're saying, and now he's trying to get Moneymaker specifically off an 8. But yeah, that's all I can come up with for a hand that can call the turn is Moneymaker has a lot of draws, or Moneymaker knows he's betting almost his entire range on the turn, and so Kitai might be calling with all his big aces.
A lot of it also might come down to, in Moneymaker's mind, that Kitai has a very strong value range here, but one that's hard to have. It's like he has a jack or better. He's got a straight or he's got a full house. Maybe sometimes he has a 6 or trip 9s, but maybe not. We're not entirely sure. And Moneymaker's thinking, okay, that's hard to have because he didn't bet the flop, so I guess I just have to call with this hand. Now, the problem with that thought process is, and not to discredit Moneymaker because it's 2014, and I certainly wasn't thinking about distribution, but when you're in hero mode, you have to use distribution or else you're just leaking equity because you're heroing too frequently if you hero every time you think your opponent might not have it. And
Yeah.
3s are certainly very low in the distribution, both hand rank wise and blocker wise. So that's a problem for making this call.
No question. The one thing maybe we can give Moneymaker a point back in his corner for is we're talking about Kitai being this great reader of people and figuring out everything and feeling like he can bluff the river, which was a good play and you think would work against Moneymaker's exact hand for sure, almost always. But maybe Moneymaker's a better reader of people than we're giving him credit for also. And maybe Moneymaker, who's been playing on the tour now for a long time and has been playing live poker constantly for over 10 years at this point, has a bit of a read on Kitai also and doesn't think Kitai is reading as strong. That's just sort of weird mumbo jumbo to say, honestly. Like, who knows? But it's not impossible. It could also just be that Chris doesn't want to be bluffed and wants to show the table he doesn't want to be bluffed. So there's a little bit of meta value here too, in that you can call this bet for 6.5 blinds, and if you're wrong, you can still turn over your pocket 3s and show the whole table. Don't try and bluff me, guys, because we're going to be here all day, and I just called the pocket 3s on this board. And that even if people know that you're doing that so they won't bluff you, they're still not going to bluff you as much because that's saying something, right? That is powerful. So there's some meta value here too. A bunch of interesting decisions on this one for sure. They may be legends, but are they infallible? I don't know. We got to talk about some of this stuff. Kitai calling the turn is at a minimum questionable. Do you think it's good? I mean, if he has a plan to try and take it away later on the river, maybe it's fine, right? Also, he is the great reader of souls. Moneymaker deciding to call this Kitai bluff on the river, certainly questionable. We don't think it can be profitable in a vacuum, but maybe with some of the meta game implications, maybe with the read he has, maybe there's something else you see that we don't. Let us know in the comments. Do you think Kitai should even be bluffing this river? Do you like Kitai's check on the flop? There's a lot you could potentially weigh in on. We want to hear what you have to say. Let us know in the comments.
We also think you should check out our podcast. It is the Breakdown Poker Podcast with the Poker Guys. You can find it anywhere you find all of the greatest podcasts in the world, which is, everywhere. You should check it out. It's good. It's where we come up with all of our ideas. It's 45 minutes of analysis on one hand. We also wrote a book. Here's a picture of it. You should check that book out. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And make sure you subscribe and click that little bell when you subscribe so you get notifications when new videos come out.